everybody. My name is Natalie. I was asked to share my story, part of my story, a couple weeks ago, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to talk about, what has really impacted my life so far. And the first thing that came to mind was the sickness in my family the last couple years. My grandpa was diagnosed with liver cancer 2 years ago, and when we found out, he was told he had less than a year left to live. This was hard, not only because I'm really close with my grandparents, which I'm very lucky for, but also because I have struggled with a lot of anxiety in my life. And this event seemed to make it progress a lot further. My parents were aware that I was an anxious person, but I don't think even they were aware of how severe my anxiety was at this time. I wish I could say that that's when my anxiety was at its worst, that it got better after that. But less than a year after my grandpa recovered, which, praise the Lord for that, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. My mom is a great person. I love her so much. But it's not fun to have a parent with cancer. The two worst things would be, one, you have to consider the possibility that your mom is not going to survive, that you are going to be left without one of your parents in your childhood. And that's not something that I wanted to think about, but it was something that I went to bed thinking about almost every single night. The second thing is that you're not used to seeing your parent in such a fragile state. You're used to seeing them really strong, really resilient. Not that my mom wasn't a resilient person, she's the most resilient person I know. But cancer makes people weak, no matter who you are. And so seeing my mom like that was really hard for me. And it made me feel like I had to take care of her instead of the other way around of her taking care of me, which is not true at all. Our whole family got through it together. We helped each other. We supported each other. But this experience just made me feel so lonely. My anxiety had progressed to a point that I wasn't opening up to anybody. I think I told one person at school about it, and that's only because they go to this church and I knew they were going to find out eventually. So I wasn't really opening up to anybody. Nobody knew what was going on. But God also put so many blessings in my life at this time. The first blessing was how they found my mom's cancer. She went to get a lump checked out in her breast, and they did a biopsy, and they said that the lump is just a swollen lymph node, so nothing to worry about there. But when they did the biopsy, they did find a tumor in her breast, which was cancerous. At the time, all I could think about was, God, why is this happening to me? It just felt like one thing after the other. My grandpa had just gotten over cancer himself, and I didn't know how I was going to get through this too. But looking back now, I see that if that lymph node hadn't been swollen, if God hadn't been working in my life, then my mom probably would have died. It was a very aggressive cancer. She probably would have died. Or she would have had to go through chemo, and she still might not have survived even then. The second blessing was where God had put me physically during this time. I had worked at a summer camp for 3 summers, and it was kind of my happy place. I had dealt with anxiety for so long that it was a place I could go to where I didn't have to worry about life. I was with people who loved me, and I was in a place where I actually felt closer to God. That summer was no different. My mom had the surgery to remove the tumor, and everything seemed like it was going to go back to normal. I was back at camp, and I get a call from my dad in the middle of the week, maybe in the afternoon, and he says, your mom collapsed in a store, and she's in the hospital again. That was probably the worst news I've ever gotten in my entire life. Because I thought that she was okay, and then suddenly she wasn't. And I remember praying, I was praying, God, why am I here an hour away from my mom when she's in a hospital? I see now that God put me in a perfect spot in this time of my life. I was surrounded with people who I had been with for years, who I considered as close as my family, in a place where I felt closer to God. God surrounded me with Christian camp counselors at the worst time of my entire life. Like, I look back at that now, and that's amazing. But at the time, I was so overwhelmed with anxiety that I didn't know how to deal with it. But this really helped me to open up to the people around me. I think it was the first time that I actually admitted that I wasn't okay, that my mom had cancer, and I was anxious out of my mind for her. The thing about anxiety is that even after the thing that first caused it is gone, it's passed, the anxiety kind of seems to latch on, which I'm sure a lot of you have experienced. So that's kind of what I went through. The months following my mom's recovery were probably my worst moments of anxiety of my entire life, because I was just so worried that she was going to get sick again, or I was going to get sick. But a few months ago, I finally started to heal. And that's not to say that I'm not an anxious person still. I would say I'm still a pretty anxious person, and that's something I'm trying to deal with and trying to work on. But the reason I started to heal is because I finally started to open up to the people around me, starting with that day when my mom got the infection. Brandon, my youth group leader, gave me a verse during this time that really helped me. It's Isaiah 41:10. And so a lot of you probably already know it, but I'll just read it. It says, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." Something about that image of God holding me up when I can't hold up myself is really comforting. It reminds me of when my dog was a puppy, and we would start walking to the park, and she would get tired on the way back, and she would lay on the ground. And so I had to pick her up and carry her on the way home. And she's like 20 pounds. It's not easy. But it's the same concept. God was holding me up when I couldn't hold up myself. And this image really helped me through a lot of times of anxiety. But the thing is, I wouldn't have been introduced to this verse. I wouldn't have been able to get help from my anxiety from this verse, from God, if I hadn't been willing to open up to Brandon, if I hadn't been willing to open up to the people around me. Everyone is going to suffer. This is a given. Everyone is going to go through something that is life-changing, and it might turn your entire life upside down. And when you're suffering, you aren't going to see the blessings, the little stuff that God is doing in your life, because you're going to be overwhelmed. You're going to be upset. You're going to be in pain or suffering. But when I finally started to open up to the people around me is when I finally started to heal. And it's also when I finally started to see where God was working in my life. I encourage you all to look for those people in your life that you know love you and that you know love God, that can help you. God put those people in your life for a reason. He put those people in your life so that you could get better and so that you could not suffer, because those people are going to help you. He wants you to open up to them so that you can see the little blessings that God is putting in your life. Thank you.